Duke Diallo Argenta is looking for his soulmate, right? Someone whispered. The Duke of Allure heard it and called for me at once. You need to be his soulmate. What? Before I could react, it was already done. Using dark magic and his control over water, the Duke engraved a name on my back, Diallo Argenta. My blood was forced to take shape, and that cursed name bloomed across my skin. A fake pharaoh, crafted with precision. A lie, made to look like destiny. And then he sent word to Diallo himself. It was a trap, of course. A power play. If Diallo wanted a supposed pharaoh, he'd have to deal with the Allure. Keep your mouth shut when you go, the Duke warned. You see, a Duke of Argenta can only awaken his inherited powers through his true pharaoh. If someone else took that place, if the bond was forged with a lie, his powers would never awaken. Argenta would weaken. One of the three great families would fall. And that's exactly what the Duke of Allure wanted. He looked at me, voice cold and final. If you fail, you'll lose your legs, and your life. You must be the pharaoh of Argenta. Rattle. The carriage shook beneath me. And just like that, I, who now possessed the body of Crua Allure, was thrown straight into the middle of this mess. It took me just 1 hour to understand the situation. Of all the worlds I could reincarnate into. Why this one? Why did I have to become her? The daughter of the Duke of Allure, the man who tricked Duke Diallo Argenta with a fake soulmate? Even as I groaned at my fate, the reflection in the hand mirror stayed the same. Dark purple hair. Deep violet eyes. A face so beautiful, so elegant, the classic villainess. I hated the role, but I couldn't deny it, I liked the way I looked. Still, it didn't matter. Because in the original story, this character, Crua Allure, wasn't meant to live for long. Once Diallo's real pharaoh showed up, Crua was exposed as a fake and disposed of. Not by Argenta, but by her own father. Yes, he killed her before she could even speak the truth. That's not happening. If I've taken over this life, then I'm changing the ending. I have to survive. If I succeeded in deceiving Diallo, Argenta would kill me too. It was a death sentence either way. So, what was the point of scheming? Of seduction? Of lying? There was only one way forward. If the result would be life or death, no in between. Then I had to rewrite the story. On my terms. And live. My name is Diallo Argenta, Lady Crua Allure. Only Diallo sat in the reception room of House Argenta. His black hair and pale blue eyes looked strikingly pure, calm, like a reflection of sunlight on a still lake. Was it because she was from the Allure family, a bloodline that controlled water, that his gaze stirred something inside her? Despite her weakened state, she couldn't look away. He wore neatly tailored clothes and treated her with flawless politeness, despite the fact that their two families had been enemies for generations. Your Excellency, the Duke of Argenta. She finally spoke, her voice steady even as her heart thudded. She had to gamble, everything. No matter how gentle Diallo seemed, she knew the truth from the original story. If he discovered that the Allure family had tried to deceive him using a fake pharaoh, his fury, ignited by the Argenta bloodline's fire, would be devastating. And she would be the first to burn. Yes, Lady Allure, he responded softly. She straightened, then delivered her words with conviction. I'm not here to be your bride. As she bowed, the necklace gifted to her as a bridal keepsake swung from her neck. Diallo's eyes flicked to it. A subtle change passed over his face. His hand, mid-motion as he poured tea, froze for just a second. You're not here to marry me, he asked, brows raised. No, she lifted her chin. I'm here for business. She was staking her life, and his destiny, on this offer. I will be your shield. A contract wife. Until your true pharaoh appears. She would not be the one to take his heart. Until the real one appears? Diallo's eyes widened. Yes. Until the one meant for you arrives. I'll help you become the strongest duke, she said firmly. So if you want revenge, direct it at the ones who deserve it. Not me. She stared straight into his pale blue eyes, unwavering. Are you claiming to be a fake pharaoh? His voice remained soft and sweet, but when he said the word fake, the atmosphere dropped in temperature. His fireborn presence chilled to ice. Yes. Her voice did not tremble. But just like that, the cold vanished. A bright, disarming smile replaced it. I don't know why you're calling yourself fake when Argenta confirmed otherwise. He tilted his head slightly. Still, if what you say is true, then it makes sense. Allure deceiving me. His smile lingered, but the room grew colder. Then we wouldn't be having this peaceful conversation right now. She was standing deep in enemy territory. If proven false, the engagement could be voided, war could ignite, and she could be taken hostage, or worse. Still, she spoke carefully, calmly. If I wanted to deceive you, I wouldn't have told you this. Diallo fell silent. I don't intend to lie to you anymore, she added, lowering her head deeply. If she failed to convince him now, her death would only come faster. Your name. On my back. Her voice was firm. Would you believe me if I showed you it's a lie? Diallo's brows drew together. Those calm blue eyes, when would they erupt into a storm? Without flinching, she turned around and exposed her back. She turned around and poured the liquid on her back. The name Diallo Argenta began to vanish from her skin as the liquid touched it. Is that enough proof that I'm not your real Ferk? She asked. Diallo stood in shock as the name disappeared. As the blood shifted beneath her skin, Diallo's eyes changed. Of course they did. Because the name once carved into her skin, his name, was now blurry, unstable, fading. A perfect lie undone. In other words, she said, her voice calm, not even the Duke of Allure or the Allure family knows what I just told you. Diallo stared at her, as if trying to read her thoughts. Then, slowly, he opened his mouth. Fake pharaoh, he murmured. I knew the Allure family looked down on me, but not to this extent. His pale blue eyes fixed on her, sharp and steady. Do you think the Argenta family will ever let someone live after deceiving their head? She met his gaze without flinching. No. They won't let me live. Even though Diallo had always been gentle, she knew the truth, he wouldn't spare her if she posed a threat. That's why I'd like to offer you a deal. I want to live. At her words, he glanced down at the now cold teacup on the table, then looked back at her. So you're saying I have a reason to continue this marriage, even though you're a fake pharaoh? Yes, she replied, her voice unwavering. There are 2 reasons. She held herself with quiet pride, and Diallo raised an eyebrow in interest. First, she said, locking eyes with him, Argenta's head is seen as the weakest among the great families. That's why Allure, who controls water, and Cardiel, who controls wind, look down on you. That's why they dared to send a fake pharaoh to deceive you. She continued firmly. If you marry me, you can play along, pretend to be deceived. That will buy you time. Time to find the real pharaoh. Time to grow stronger. While they lower their guard. Because the moment their marriage became official, the Duke of Allure would assume Diallo had fallen for their trick. And second, she said, eyes lowering to her fingertips. Argenta protects the sea. But I've heard your defenses are weakening, because your pharaoh has yet to appear. She looked up again, gaze steady and full of resolve. Until the real pharaoh is found, if I can fully inherit the Allure ability. It was a tempting offer. One the Duke would find hard to refuse. There were many aiming for him, yet no one truly stood at his side. But now, the one offering her hand was none other than his enemy's hidden card, Crua Allure herself. Are those the terms of your deal? He asked, his blue eyes unreadable. She nodded lightly. Yes. In exchange for this contract marriage, attack Allure, and protect me. He brought a hand to his mouth, deep in thought. Silence fell between them, heavy and long. Then she noticed it, his eyes, once a pale blue, now darkened like the depths of the sea. Finally, Diallo spoke, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his lips. All right, he said. You may call me Diallo from now on. And with that, he extended his hand to her. That night, Crua Allure took the VIP room in the Argenta mansion. Have you checked? Diallo, who had entered the room silently, asked. The woman in front of him bowed her head. She was dressed as a maid, but from her swift movements, it was clear that she had been trained. Yes. Your Excellency's name on her back was elaborately engraved. As she said, the name is blurry and will likely disappear over time. Thud. Diallo Argenta, who had been handling paperwork, quietly put down his quill pen. All of Argenta's informants who had come in one after another gave the same answer. As I looked into it, it seems that the informant within the Allure family also expressed surprise at how quiet the family remained, even though Crua Allure awakened as a pharaoh. Even though the Allure and Argenta families were at odds, it was clear that if Crua had truly awakened as the real pharaoh, there would have been an uproar, since she was their daughter. At that moment, he suddenly recalled the events from when he had met her. That was how she had called him. Crua Allure, with her deep purple hair, had called him like that. She had been different from what he had expected. Even though rumors described her as moody and impulsive, when he looked into her eyes, he saw a light in them, as if she was looking forward to the future. Was she acting? A deal with the enemy. He looked at the Duke of Allure letter, which Crua Allure had brought. The marriage conditions, written alongside arrogant words, even though he had sent a fake pharaoh, were absurd. He couldn't understand why the expenses for maintaining the Duchess' dignity should be paid by the Duke of Allure. Please station 100 more Allure knights on Tila Hill, between Argenta and Allure, where monsters have recently begun to gather. Tila Hill was a strategic location between the two families. If war were to break out between them, the side that occupied that area would gain an overwhelming advantage. Currently, Tila Hill was owned by the Argenta family, yet the Duke of Allure wanted him to hand over the land. And once a month, would you be considerate enough to let Crua visit me? Their reason for such a request was written below, and it was absurd. I couldn't say that the relationship between Argenta and Allure is good, so it pains me to send my beautiful daughter away so suddenly. A beautiful daughter. That's what he wrote, yet he sent his daughter into the enemy's camp as if he were abandoning her. Diallo, reading the threatening letter, recited the sentence and laughed. Yes. Diallo gestured to the maid, who kept her head bowed. Take care of the person who will become the Duchess. And he sealed the letter by stamping the Argenta family seal on his reply to the Duke of Allure. Do what the Allure want. The Duke of Allure had given him an interesting bride. As he thought that, Diallo laughed silently. The preparations for the extravagant wedding began without delay. Now that Duke Argenta had found his pharaoh, there was no reason to prolong the process, and so, the arrangements progressed swiftly. The wedding expenses were to be split evenly, 50% Argenta, 50% Allure. On paper, it was an equal deal. But in truth, the benefits heavily favored the Allure family. While a grand hall was built just for the ceremony, today's banquet would officially announce the union of two great houses, Argenta and Allure. Diallo Argenta and Crua Allure were to host it together. To the outside world, theirs was a fairy tale match, the perfect marriage between nobility. But only the three ducal families and the imperial house knew the truth, that this was no ordinary union. That Crua was not the real pharaoh. It's been a long time since the three dukes' bloodlines were joined, murmured Viel, the maid. Gentle in voice, cold in nature, head of Argenta's infamous cleaning department. Crua, aware of who Viel truly was in the original story, asked calmly, did Diallo order you to serve me? Viel bowed. With heart and soul. I look forward to your kind cooperation, Miss Crua Allure. It was a warning and a vow. She knew. Crua knew she knew. Beyond the window stretched the endless sea, Argenta's domain. Just as Allure guarded the forest and Cardiel the desert, each family bore an ancient duty, to contain the monsters and the chaos that threatened the empire. To Crua, the sea looked beautiful. Familiar. Controllable. A single thought, and the water in her glass leapt up, forming a perfect dolphin. Splash. Effortless. Natural. More natural than it should have been. And soon, the banquet would begin. With it, the real game. The empire was watching. And high society was in turmoil. The three duke families held an unrivaled position in the empire due to their unique abilities. It would be a fatal weakness if word got out that the head of any of these families couldn't properly develop their powers without Pharaoh. That was why this marriage had to appear affectionate, one that blossomed despite the long-standing hostility between the Allure and Argenta families. In short, they had to look like truly sweet newlyweds. Are you confident in acting that way? In the original story, Diallo Argenta was criticized for failing to act his part. The record stated as much. But today was different. Krua had no intention of allowing anyone to whisper about her or Diallo behind their fans. Meanwhile, the Duke of Allure constantly nagged her about failing to control her husband. That's. As expected, Diallo Argenta only gave a troubled smile in response. There was only one solution. Then promise me one thing. He needed to act. So, just before they entered the banquet hall, Krua leaned in close and whispered into Diallo's ear. I'll lead, just follow me. At the very least, he could manage not to be awkward, right? In the Empire, proposals followed a unique tradition. Specifically, the method of publicly announcing engagements was unlike any other. Krua walked carefully, holding the white veil in place as it fluttered slightly with each step. The Duke of Allure daughter, Lady Krua Allure, is entering. She heard the announcement as she stepped into the hall, filled with waiting nobles. Though she could barely see through the veil, none of them seemed to wonder why she had entered alone. Because this was how engagements worked here. Everyone already knew, through whispered gossip, that the Allure and Argenta families would soon be tied. Both sides were expected to accidentally leak the news. Then, at the formal banquet hosted by the families, the nobles would pretend ignorance while speculating in hushed tones about who the groom might be, eyes drawn to the bride cloaked in a white veil. Guests murmured, torn between gossip about Krua and speculation about Cardiel's response. Cardiel of the Wind. The Cardiel Duchy was at its peak under its current head, Siet, one of the strongest leaders in their history. With Siet's power, the Knights of Cardiel were formidable, and the desert they protected was rumored to be nearly free of monsters, swept clean by fierce winds. The Cardiel nobles gathered together, whispering with stiff expressions. Among them stood a man in his 30s, the current Duke of Cardiel. He had once roamed freely in his youth, befriending commoners and aristocrats alike, very unlike the other two dukes. Then, the Duke of Argenta, Diallo, is entering. A servant's voice rang through the hall. I look forward to your kind cooperation. Krua recalled the words Diallo had spoken to her before they parted earlier. I'll lead, just follow me. Is that okay? And now, the black-haired young man who had blushed at her words entered the hall. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Duke of Argenta has grown up without us noticing. Oh. He wore a pristine white suit adorned with dark blue accents, colors symbolizing the boundless sea that Argenta defended. The blue embroidery matched his eyes perfectly. Diallo's newly styled hair was neatly swept back as he walked directly toward her, not a hint of hesitation in his steps. The moment had come. Krua smiled behind the veil. Step by step, he approached, stopping directly in front of her. The surrounding nobles, who had made way for him, held their breath. Krua. His voice trembled slightly as it echoed in the hall. Perhaps it was just his poor acting, but to the gathered nobles, he came across as a shy groom overwhelmed with emotion. Yes, Duke of Argenta, Krua replied softly. He reached up, fingers brushing the edge of her veil. His hands, though carefully restrained, were undeniably strong, contrary to how the novel had once described him. When she gave a small nod, he gently lifted the veil that covered her face and neck. Then, he leaned in. This was the moment they would become newlyweds who had fallen deeply in love. It had to look real. Come on, she whispered under her breath. The last thing she saw before her vision blurred was the glimmer of his blue eyes. What was he thinking? And then, he embraced her, tight and sure. Without warning, Diallo kissed her. It was so sudden, so intense, her knees buckled beneath her. The days that followed blurred everything. When he finally pulled away, he whispered just for her ears, his breath still warm. Like this? His blue eyes trembled, revealing a flicker of guilt. Krua steadied herself and looked up, locking eyes with him. Don't think you stole my first kiss. This is what I want. Diallo blinked, slightly startled, as if she'd read his mind. Then, she pulled him in again, this time embracing him with greater warmth. They had to fool everyone tonight. But before she could say anything else, Diallo's powerful hand gently cradled the back of her head. Ah. He kissed her again, even deeper than before. The kiss was hot, fierce, and consuming, powerful enough to burn through every layer of cloth between them and leave her breathless. Wow. Applause and cheers erupted from the surrounding nobles. Tonight, they were no longer enemies or strangers. They were newlyweds, perfectly, undeniably in love. At least, that was the illusion. As the spectacular banquet hosted by Argenta and Allure came to an end, the rumors circulating in society afterward hardly deviated from the expectations of the two families. I didn't expect Argenta and Allure to make up. The relationship between the two families has been bad for a long time, hasn't it? Especially in this generation. Nevertheless, this kind of banquet. Most people said that, but they also spoke about something else. The newlyweds looked very happy. Has there been such a sweet couple in society lately? They were whispering about the couple's actions under the white veil. Of course, what the two talked about did not leak out from beneath the veil. However, the images of them whispering each other's names, embracing, and kissing were deeply imprinted in the minds of high society. Thud. After the banquet was finished, Diallo Argenta returned to the office, naturally, after escorting his lovely new bride to her room. The two were now officially engaged, and even if they stayed in the same mansion for many days, it would not be considered inappropriate. They were convinced by your performance today, said Rick, the head of intelligence for the Argenta family, who served him personally upon his return to the office. Diallo nodded slightly in reply. I think it was because she was much bolder than I expected. Rick replied lightly to his words. People also said Krua Allure was quite bold, but most of them are talking about you. His eyes met Rick's. Although this man was always blunt in his words and actions, he was more loyal to Argenta than anyone else. Rick fell silent as their eyes met. The nobles thought you were different from usual. Diallo Argenta had always appeared indecisive and weak. Although he was behind a veil at the banquet, it still became a topic of conversation because he revealed his desire to monopolize the bride. Diallo nodded slightly. They think we're a very sweet pair. Of course. The more the rumors spread, the better. Just spread them more, but don't cross the line. Argenta's intelligence network reached the Empire's borders. They could create rumors that didn't exist, so it would be easy to circulate and control them perfectly. Yes, I'll inform the family. Sigh. As he took a short breath, looking down at the table, he loosened his necktie with a few quick movements. It wasn't because he felt stuffy. It was because he was dizzy, as if he had eaten too much. And it wasn't due to the changing circumstances caused by the marriage between Allure and Argenta, or anything of that sort. I'll lead, just follow me. Do it boldly. He thought of Krua Allure beneath a white veil, whispering those words. Act as if you love me. It hadn't been a confession, nor an incitement. It had been a kind of provocation. Krua Allure couldn't have known what kind of man she was dealing with, could she? That was the only reason she could be bold enough to whisper such things. Of course, that was exactly what Diallo Argenta had been waiting for. Silly and indecisive Duke. No one could tell whether it was an act or not, this young Duke caught between the three great houses. Those who had already formed their opinions of him were slowly drifting away. They weren't truly part of the Argenta family. The ones who could turn their backs at any time had begun reaching out to the other two Duke families, perhaps believing they had nothing to gain from their current master. Still, they would pay the price. I said, follow my lead. Recalling his bold new bride, a low laugh escaped his lips again. At some point, his fingertips, which had been rhythmically tapping on the desk, came to a stop. Sigh. Diallo thought of Krua Allure, how she had walked on eggshells, yet still came willingly into his arms. He remembered those purple eyes of hers. Perhaps she hadn't expected him to lead the kiss. Perhaps she hadn't expected her soft lips to be met quite so aggressively. Like this? He remembered her lips and her wide, surprised eyes as he took a deep breath and echoed her earlier boldness. Her violet gaze had widened in shock. And when he kissed her deeply, truly, the Krua Allure who said she would lead, had collapsed, completely defenseless. It had been Diallo Argenta who held and supported her trembling legs. It had been he who devoured her lips beneath the veil until she was breathless. After that, her wide, round eyes, like a startled rabbit's, had stared at him with disbelief. Krua Allure. He tapped the desk slowly once more. She must have revised her opinion of him. From indecisive and weak to decisive and bold. And Diallo, after that banquet, had also rewritten his evaluation of Krua Allure. The Krua Allure he had known was nothing like this. The old Krua, depending on her mood, would discard or kill her subordinates. The Allure family tradition was to kill without hesitation, and Krua Allure had always seemed to embrace that heritage with a smile. However, as Diallo Argenta saw it, Krua Allure was a completely different person. It wasn't just me who was acting. Krua Allure must have been the same kind of person as him. The way she had behaved so far was just a facade for the Duke of Allure. It was easy to tell after observing her for just a few days. I'll lead, just follow me. That was the real her. He was sure of it. Do it, don't do it. For Argenta, she was a perfect match. Do it, don't do it. He mumbled the words again and let out a short laugh. She probably didn't know which side he had chosen, but it was too late for regrets. She had already stepped into Argenta's territory, and a deal had been made under the white veil of the banquet. It was an irreversible deal. Diallo gently ran his fingers over his lower lip and smiled. The corners of his mouth lifted, and his eyes reflected something unreadable. After the banquet, the Argenta mansion was buzzing with excitement. It was rare to see such an atmosphere. Everyone seemed thrilled, from Vial and the maids to the other servants and even the stablemen. Even if the head of an ordinary household gets married, there's usually no reason for the servants to be this excited. Their master's marriage normally wouldn't affect the servants' daily lives, right? Besides, wasn't Krua Allure supposed to be a wicked woman in their eyes? Someone who wouldn't hesitate to kill a servant if she were displeased? Yet the people of Argenta, even those who'd surely heard the rumors, seemed genuinely happy to have her around. Everyone seems so happy about the engagement, it makes me feel good, too. At her words, Viel, who was helping her with a bath, gave a light smile. I think they have high hopes because of the banquet. Because we look like sweet newlyweds? Splash. Krua glanced at her after playfully splashing the water. Viel gave a small nod. Then, after confirming they were alone in the bath, she leaned in and whispered. You know the truth. Viel froze at her whisper. Krua could tell she hadn't expected her to bring it up. More than that, Viel didn't think Krua would realize that she knew about the true nature of this marriage, how it was all a contract. What do you think of this engagement? To someone unaware of the truth, it would seem like a sweet love story. But Krua needed to know what it looked like to someone who did know. After all, she and Diallo weren't just fooling high society, they had to fool the Duke of Allure, too. Yes, the Duke of Allure had sent her in as a fake pharaoh. Make sure to seduce Diallo Argenta. Take the Duke of Argenta's position away from him. That was what the man had ordered her to do. She had to be convincing. It had to look like Diallo had truly fallen for her. It looked very real, Viel finally said, after a short pause. She set down the perfume bottle and smiled. Even to me, to the point of being deceived. Seeing her expression, it didn't seem like Viel was lying. Thankfully, the performance seemed to have been successful. When Krua smiled face to face with her. Emergency. There was a sudden voice and a sound of footsteps outside the bathroom. What's going on? In response to her question, Viel briefly ignored her and grabbed a maid who happened to be passing by. What's the situation? Krua glanced back at Viel. Seeing that she didn't ask what's going on, but instead asked about the situation first, it meant that Viel already had some idea of what had happened. Still, she had been in the bathroom with her this whole time, so how? Nonetheless, all the questions in her head vanished the moment she heard the maid's reply. The Endless Sea has been breached. She understood what that meant, even without being part of the Argenta family. It was their responsibility to protect the land from monster invasions by defending the Endless Sea. But it had been breached? Krua quickly turned to the window. Even though it was dark and she couldn't see anything, if the monsters had really gone on a rampage and entered the land, things wouldn't be this quiet. Was the line of defense completely breached? Viel asked seriously. The maid only shook her head. That's not it. The maid hesitated, glancing at Krua, clearly unsure if she should speak in front of someone she considered an outsider. Krua, however, was old enough, and important enough, to be the hostess of this house. She had to act the part, even if she was quietly preparing for a divorce. That meant she didn't need to step aside just because a maid looked unsure. So, she crossed her arms and stared at the maid, clearly signaling that she wasn't going anywhere. There were two monster groups that invaded the third zone. The group that attacked had a much higher number of monsters than usual. The maid continued. As she listened, Krua thought, how does a maid in this mansion know so much about the battlefield, especially without being a knight? She hadn't expected a maid to know anything about such matters at all. Roa, the field commander, told me to check the number of troops available for reinforcement. But the line of defense was breached instantly because the second group was overwhelmingly large. And apparently, this maid wasn't the only one. It seemed like, aside from the knights, even the other servants and maids were well informed. The number of monsters was much higher than usual. Yes, the maid added, according to those on the scene, it seems like several monster groups joined forces. Ah. That reminded her of something. In the original story, there had been a description of how the movement of monsters in the Endless Sea had become increasingly unusual. Viel frowned at the maid's words. The defense was breached so suddenly. How did they manage it? The maid gave a slight bow and replied. Roa, the sinner, was caught in the middle of the monsters because of his responsibilities. While they were on a rampage, he managed to rebuild the line of defense. Krua didn't catch the rest of what she said. Sinner? Hadn't she just said Roa was the field commander? Dee laughed, the maid answered, lowering her head before stepping back. Krua watched the maid glance at her and then at Viel again. Why is he called a sinner? She couldn't understand it. Even she, who had read the original story, hadn't known there would be such a massive monster attack. So how could someone actually on the battlefield have predicted it? This was practically a natural disaster. It wasn't anyone's fault. Still, Roa had taken responsibility and thrown himself into the fray to stop the monsters. In her eyes, that was a noble sacrifice. Yet neither Viel, whose expression she studied carefully, nor the others around seemed to honor that sacrifice. In fact, they acted as if it was normal. He didn't do his job properly, Viel said flatly. If he hadn't thrown himself in to buy time, he would have been punished more harshly under Argenta's code of conduct. Krua frowned slightly at that. In response, Viel smoothed out the wrinkles in her dress and added in a calm tone. You must have never encountered anything like this in Allure. So it must feel strange to you. As she gestured to the nearby servants, those whispering in the hallway quietly disappeared. Now that only the two of them remained, Viel spoke again. You asked me why he was a sinner? Krua gave a small nod. Was it really true that he hadn't done his job properly? And if he hadn't sacrificed himself, he would have been punished even more severely under Argenta's code. Do or don't. As she continued, Krua opened her eyes wide upon hearing those calm words. It was something she had heard and seen before. That exact sentence was the first thing mentioned when Argenta came up in the original story. Even though it had been a passing line back then, hearing it in this situation felt cruel. So, if they didn't finish their job properly, it's the same as not doing it at all? Either do it or don't. When she asked, recalling the words, Viel laughed. You understand quickly. It seemed like sacrificing your life for your duty was expected, and even then, if the job wasn't done right, you were still a sinner. The goosebumps she felt weren't just because she had come straight out of the bath. It was that realization. What about Roa? At that time, Diallo Argenta had also been informed of the incident. Of course, he received much more in-depth information than Krua Allure. Details like how many monsters appeared, what kind they were, and how the field commander, Roa, had thrown himself forward to stop them. He drove himself to death, despite Argenta's power. Argenta's power, each of the three Duke families held control over fire, water, and wind. That much was known publicly, but there was more to it. Someone who pledged loyalty to the head of a family could use that family's power, until the head themselves awakened it. Of course, the power was much weaker compared to what the family head would eventually have. And since the strength of those using it also depended on how strong their head was, everyone hoped for a powerful leader. Diallo Argenta, without a pharaoh, was known as the weakest of the three. Still, that was exactly what Diallo Argenta wanted. What about the body? When Diallo asked this without a change in expression, the knight who reported it went silent for a moment. It will be taken care of soon. Bury him right in front of the Endless Sea, Diallo replied immediately. That way, Roa, the sinner, would guard the Endless Sea even in death. Yes, the knight responded, then stepped back. We'll need a new commander in the third zone. As Diallo spoke, he suddenly thought of his bride. They said she had been in the bathroom and was surprised to hear the news. She'd even asked why Roa was a sinner, with an innocent expression, as if she truly didn't understand. What should I do with my bride? He laughed silently to himself. Krua Allure was more innocent than he'd imagined. Rest well, Lady Krua Allure. No. She remembered Diallo just before they parted after the banquet. His light blue eyes, slightly bent in a smile, had seemed to glimmer. Even his cheeks had turned slightly red. My lovely bride. That word lovely which he had added as if rehearsing, made her feel strangely guilty. She had thought it was just a fair deal. But come to think of it, Diallo Argenta had been not friendly. Krua touched her forehead with her finger. The hostess of each noble family managed internal affairs and upheld the family's reputation in high society. Rumors were a measure of her competence. Krua assumed that would be her role in Argenta, for a while, at least. But the family turned out to be stranger than she expected. Business. As the wedding preparations began, Viel, the mansion's butler and maid, started explaining the duties of Argenta's hostess. Krua wasn't officially Duchess yet, but as Diallo's so-called pharaoh, she would fill that role until the real one arrived. She expected only light responsibilities, pretending to be pharaoh without digging too deep. Knowing too much could be dangerous, like in the original story, where the fake pharaoh died at Argenta's hands, likely by Viel. Yes. You must understand Argenta's affairs to fulfill your role, Viel said. But the things Viel taught were too much, like Argenta's underworld ties, which she referred to as business. You can teach me that? Krua asked. Yes, Viel replied with a faint smile. The head wishes it. Diallo? Did he forget she was only a stand-in? Do you agree with him? Krua pressed. Viel, someone who'd kill without orders if needed, simply smiled. Of course, I agree. What? I'll start with the mercenary guild, she said, revealing Argenta's secrets without hesitation. Rest well, Lady Krua Allure. No. How splendid this wedding must be. Weddings among the three great families, masters of water, fire, and wind, were always unique. But this union between two of them promised to be especially extravagant. Wumph. Soft candlelight flickered in the dim hall, casting a mysterious glow. The flames, likely from Argenta's power, hung upside down, mesmerizing the guests. Oh. As expected of Argenta. Admiring murmurs spread among the crowd. Some guests had gathered near the Cardiel family, who were not involved in this union. They quietly observed. Suddenly, water began to flow gently along both sides of the wide Virgin Road, an elegant waterway prepared by the Allure family. The Duke of Allure, seated among the bride's family, had activated it. Congratulations, Your Excellency. What a fortunate alliance. A wonderful occasion. As nobles came to offer greetings, the Duke of Allure stood watching the path where his daughter would soon walk. Krua Allure. He silently mouthed her name. She had done well, marrying Diallo Argenta. If she could seduce him and claim his hidden potential, Argenta's flame would fall into their hands. And if Diallo, unable to use his power properly, was eliminated, Allure would reign supreme. He smiled to himself. Tap. My white shoes touched the stairs. From behind the bride's veil, I saw the buzzing crowd. The ceremony would begin with the bride and groom walking from opposite ends of the Virgin Road to meet in the middle. The Duke of Allure was easy to spot, his sharp eyes were fixed on me. Even without seeing his full expression, I knew he was watching. Make it happen. He mouthed the words before turning away. He still believed this marriage was a success. That meant our plans, Diallo's and mine, were still hidden. Next to him sat Pentas Allure, Krua's brother and the family heir, wearing a cheerful mask. To outsiders, they looked like a proud family. But I knew better. Their minds were full of schemes. Just like Cardiel, who also sought power, Allure would stop at nothing. But their ambition wasn't enough to control Argenta, at least, not yet. I recall the original story, where a maid from Allure quietly witnessed the feud between the three ducal families. Having read it, I couldn't pretend not to know. But the seats on the groom's side. Though others looked irritated, something else caught my attention. It's a wedding. A time for joy and blessings. Yet on Diallo's side, the seats were cold and empty. A bouquet of chrysanthemums lay where his immediate family should have sat. They were gone from this world. And the one who killed Duke Argenta and his wife was sitting right across from them. The Duke of Allure. A tragedy. Did Diallo know? I remember Diallo's gentle smile. He probably didn't know the truth. Even in the original story, the author never mentioned him being aware of his parents' murder. If he knew, would he have greeted the daughter of their killer with such warmth? I can't do it. I whispered. But even if Diallo had found out now, it was too late to stop the marriage. What a pitiful man. I bit my lip, heart aching. All right, Diallo. I'll help you get revenge. Even if this wedding felt like a farce, I hoped he'd endure it. I stepped forward. My white shoes touched the Virgin Road, and the water sparkled under the soft lights. The wedding of Duke Diallo Argenta and Lady Krua Allure shall now begin, the officiant declared. God will watch over the fate of two divine souls. We stood close, so close our noses nearly touched. Shouldn't it be sweeter? Diallo whispered, his breath tickling my cheek. Though it was all an act, my ears burned. I nodded and hugged his waist gently. Then, let me lead this time, he murmured. What? Before I could react, he pulled me close, his grip firm on my waist and shoulders. His legs brushed through my dress. I lost my breath, vision blurring, and then. Oh my God. Ah. Gasps echoed as Diallo lifted me in his arms, cradling me under the knees. Thank you, my lovely bride, he whispered, and I blushed. What a performance. Even the guests seemed pleased by the candid moment. Wrapping my arms around his neck, I kissed him lightly. Cheers and applause erupted. It was a wedding unlike any seen in decades, dramatic, dazzling, unforgettable. In conclusion, the wedding was a success. As expected, the weather was unpredictable, but thanks to our preparations, especially the extra dresses, everything went smoothly, unlike in the original. Take care of my daughter, said the Duke of Allure, smiling as he hugged me tightly. Then, he patted Diallo on the shoulder. Of course, Diallo replied, giving his usual gentle smile. I hope you forget the enmity between our families and treat her well. How bold of him, he was the one who caused the deaths of the Argenta Duke and Duchess. Don't worry, Diallo answered, then kissed my forehead and led me to the carriage. We were headed to a villa near both families' mansions, overlooking the sea and forest, a short honeymoon retreat. As the door shut, I whispered, it was perfect. Startled, Diallo squeezed my shoulder, then subtly signaled for silence, mouthing, he might hear us. With a calmer smile, he leaned in and whispered, I'm glad it went well. We held hands like making a vow. Now, I only had to protect this man's heart so he could meet his pharaoh. I smiled while Diallo nervously fanned himself. Don't worry. I'll just hold your hand tonight and sleep. Since Diallo couldn't leave Argenta for long, the villa was built just for us. On the top floor, I admired the view, the forest on one side and the sea on the other. Do you like it? Diallo asked. It's beautiful. Let's have breakfast here tomorrow. I'll arrange it, he said, kissing my forehead. But I felt his lips tremble. I hugged him tightly, acting like a blissful newlywed. I put away your luggage, madam, a maid said. The maids from Allure, sent by the Duke, were likely there to keep watch but would leave in 3 days. Eventually, it would be just the two of us. Only the two of us were allowed to enter the room where our first night would take place. I thought it would be small since it didn't take long to build, even though the villa is huge. I finally relaxed a little after the maids disappeared. Acting like I was in love with Diallo had been exhausting. Even when I left to prepare for the night, I had to pretend to be a nervous newlywed. Even though it's so big. I didn't expect to walk this far, I muttered. Diallo smiled awkwardly. He entered the room, sat by the bed, and poured some wine. Pour. The dark red wine had clearly been prepared to calm the nerves of newlyweds. When I entered in my gown, he stood up to greet me. There's wine here, shouldn't we drink it? He handed me one of the 2 glasses and drank his first. Gulp. I watched his Adam's apple move. He looked good in the light shirt, and with a few undone buttons, the black lily pattern on his collarbone was visible. We should, I said, taking a sip after swirling the glass gently. It smelled sweet, with barely a hint of alcohol, and the taste was pleasantly fruity. After tilting the glass, our eyes met, and we laughed, as if on cue. Come this way, Diallo said, gesturing to the bed. It was neatly arranged, with only faint traces of movement. A canopy meant to give shy newlyweds privacy was partially tied up. I reached up and untied a curtain. Thud. The heavy curtain dropped in front of me. With half the bed now hidden, we sat face to face and laughed again. It felt easy and comfortable, being alone together. Well then, I said, lightly taking his hand. Tonight's job is done. Diallo gently held my hand again. We had decided to sleep holding hands. A quiet smile formed on his face as he looked down at our intertwined fingers. I shrugged as he kept holding my hand. Don't worry, I have no intention of breaking my promise. I'll even say it, in case you doubt it. Diallo nodded without hesitation. I looked into his eyes and said softly, I like this kind of atmosphere. I didn't dislike the idea of being a couple in love. Still, this was a contract marriage, and talking like this, gently and honestly, didn't feel bad at all. I'm glad you're satisfied, Krua. I blinked in surprise at his words. You're not a lady anymore, he added with a faint smile. Oh. He leaned closer, his eyes slightly narrowed. If we really want to appear married, we have to at least seem close. So let's practice. I pressed my index finger to his lips. Call me by name. Ah, he froze at the unexpected touch, which made me chuckle softly. We'll need to act closer in public. Are you going to get this flustered every time? Practice from now on. Something like this. What? There was a ripple in his eyes, which used to be as calm as a lake. If he wanted to do it, he had to do it correctly. Touch me like this. I took his hand and placed it on my cheek. You don't have to be sorry if it needs to be done. He was also sorry for taking Krua's first kiss in the original story, so that was why I said it in advance. Don't hesitate to act like a newlywed couple. Act like you really love me. At my words, his hand moved a little before it gently and carefully smoothed over my ears and cheeks. I know you won't break your promise anyway. A person who had been surprised just by me touching his lips wouldn't be able to do anything to me. Besides, if he wanted to inherit his ability properly, he couldn't harm me. And that was all the more reason why he wouldn't eat me, so we simply had the safest relationship with each other. No matter what kind of sweet or bizarre things we did in front of others. Diallo, who blinked a few times at my words, finally opened his mouth. Yes. Really? His hand moved a little more boldly at my words. The hand that had been touching my ear then brushed my chin and wrapped around the back of my neck. Conceivably because he was an Argenta, there was a strange heat in his hand. Diallo, who had been staring at me with his blue eyes for a moment, opened his mouth. Krua Allure. Then his gently moving lips touched my index finger. Feeling the softness of his lips against my finger, I felt strange. Today was the third and final day of the Allure maid's stay. From now on, they, who had been spying on me, would be gone. I still had to be careful around the people of Argenta, but at least it would be easier to breathe without Allure watching. This is L'Oreal tea. It helps relieve fatigue, a maid said. Diallo was busy in his office with Argenta's affairs. His Excellency will be down soon. I smiled, recalling his apologetic face when he left. Thank you. Please take some to Diallo too, he must be tired. Yes, madam. Diallo now addressed me properly. After the wedding, I officially became the Duchess of Argenta. Just then. Wah. Mom, A child's cry rang out. The child ran toward me, but Viel quickly stepped in. She's not someone you can approach so casually. It was clear the child didn't live here, only servants should be in the mansion. Help me, sister. The child still ran to me, so Viel instinctively checked them for weapons. When she found none, she turned to me. What should I do? Come here. Why are you crying? At my words, Viel stepped back, and the child hugged me tightly. Mom. I want my mom. I came here with her. I tilted my head. Any servant bring a child? Not from Argenta, Viel replied immediately. The child burst into tears again and clung to me. I'll take them to the street. It'll be easier to find the mother, Viel offered. No. It's okay. Madam, it's dangerous. I met her gaze and said firmly, I trust the people of Allure and Argenta. Allure needed me alive. Argenta, whose head I now supported as Duchess, wouldn't hurt me. The knights were guarding every corner. But if you're worried, I won't mention this to anyone else. I smiled. I trust you. Viel's eyes widened. What harm can a child do anyway? Sniffle. All right, madam. Viel didn't order the maids to follow me, and the child's tears soon stopped. Shall we go? I gently stroked the child's head and walked, trusting I'd find the main road. As we moved away from the others, the child stopped crying and suddenly tugged at my dress, then began leading the way. Huh? What's wrong? I asked, confused. That's when I grew suspicious. 1. The child stuck too close despite tight security. 2. Muddy shoes, yet no mud around. 3. A glimpse of an Allure insignia beneath their collar. It felt staged. The child may not have had a weapon, but there were other dangerous abilities. Still, their body hadn't transformed, meaning they were truly a child, or at least looked like one. I wasn't worried. Viel would be nearby, ready to act. Eventually, the child led me to a quiet area and turned back, now with a cold, adult voice. Miss Crua Allure, she said, her wrist revealing an Allure seal glowing with power, clearly sent by the Duke himself. Did you spend the night with the Duke of Argenta? I hadn't expected such a direct check. Of course, I replied calmly. Since we had actually just slept holding hands, I answered right away. They hadn't watched us, after all, and only Diello and I knew the truth about last night. However, the child asked again, reaching out a hand to me. In that case, give me evidence. At the unexpected demand for proof of our first night, my eyes widened. Evidence? The child looked up at me boldly. Anything. As long as it proves you spent the night with the Duke of Argenta. I tilted my head slightly, pretending to think. Evidence. What kind of evidence is usually left after wedding night? Well, it would have been a crisis if I hadn't asked Diello to prepare something in advance. Ah, I said, as if I'd remembered something. Diello's embarrassed face from last night came to mind, his flushed expression, the awkward tension. Tuck. And that strange feeling. As I unbuttoned the top of my dress, the memory returned, and my face flushed slightly. Tuck, tuck. After unfastening a few buttons, I pulled the fabric slightly aside. Visible on my collarbone was a faint, suggestive mark, proof Diello had left just in case. Is this enough? The child stared at me, then gave a small nod. I've confirmed it. He turned around and activated a magical device, transforming back into a child before running off toward the vacant lot. Wow. I found the way, he shouted, sounding so convincingly childlike it gave me goosebumps. I buttoned my dress as I watched him run into the arms of an Allure maid. Oh my, she gasped, eyes wide. She hugged the child tightly, then bowed to me in apology before leaving. As I thought, they came to check. In the original story, there was no scene showing what happened that night. It all focused on Crua tricking Diello into spending the night, so I didn't even remember the details. He overwhelmed me in an instant, breathing softly against my skin. Wearing only a gown, I flinched when his hand brushed my exposed collarbone. Noticing, he gently held me and met my eyes with warmth. I'll start now, Crua, he whispered. I'm sorry, he added quietly, then leaned in. He hugged me, kissed the tip of my nose, and pressed deeper, his breath on my ear, lips grazing my neck, and hands lingering left a vivid memory. My clothes slipped down, bare shoulders marked by his touch. His body closed the space between us until not even air remained. What? I fanned my flushed face, recalling the moment. This heat wasn't planned. Just thinking about last night, I couldn't calm the blush rising in my cheeks. How? The question I hadn't dared to ask echoed in my mind. How is this person so good at this? Argenta's fence is solid. Diello muttered, standing by the window with his chin in his hand. Through a small gap in the curtain, he watched Crua Allure return to the garden. Tap, tap, tap. His fingers tapped the windowsill in rhythm, then stopped. Yes, Argenta's fence was solid. To outsiders, a high wall, to those within, a shield. Crua Allure. She had once served Duke Allure and became Argenta's Duchess by his design. She revealed she was a fake pharaoh and proposed a contract marriage until the real one appeared. Diello narrowed his eyes. Last night, those same eyes she said were like the sea, had looked into hers, calm and unreadable. He didn't fully trust her. Marriage meant little in a world where smiles often hid daggers. Crua Allure was one of the three families, and Allure by blood, known for cunning and deception. They never hesitated to use tricks. Diallo Argenta had led her too far inside the fence. In Argenta's solid walls, only Argenta moved freely. Crua's unusual behavior drew attention. Whispers spread that the head of the family was weak, bringing in an Allure girl only fueled doubt. Such people had no place in Argenta. They'd be dealt with when the real pharaoh arrived. Do it or don't. Tap, tap, tap. His fingers resumed their rhythm. Crua had to choose, to see them as an Allure or stand with Argenta. I hope she truly meant the contract. He wanted this to be a deal without betrayal, and would keep watching her, in the guise of a shy husband. That night, I collapsed onto the bed with a deep sigh. Sigh. It came out involuntarily. I hadn't expected them to actually check. I knew Duke Allure wouldn't sit still, but... Really? Asking for evidence? What kind of evidence did they want? And sending a fake child? Sure, it was a clever way to lower my guard, but still, seeing an adult woman disguised like that was shocking. Ugh. Allure's malice knows no bounds. Knock. As I stewed, Diallo knocked and peeked in. Can I come in, Crua? Did he really think I'd use this room alone? Of course. He entered, smiling when I tapped the seat beside me. Sorry, I wasn't with you this afternoon, there was an urgent issue on the coast. I reached for his hand. No problem. It'd be strange for me, still unfamiliar with Argenta's affairs, to be in the office anyway. No matter how close we acted, some things were better left separate. I kept glancing toward your office, I added. Really? Diallo blinked. I laughed. I waited like a new bride, wondering when you'd come down. He smiled apologetically. I must be a bad husband. What matters is that Duke Allure no longer sees us as a fake couple. Speaking of him. I leaned in and pointed to my collarbone. They checked it. Diallo's eyes widened. Did he check it himself? His face darkened. I frowned too. No, it was someone else, a woman. I waved my hands, emphasizing the point. Diallo gently grabbed my hand. I see. I almost misunderstood the Duke. He is the enemy. Misunderstanding or not. I trailed off. Diallo should misunderstand him more, he did kill the Duke and Duchess of Argenta. Anyway, thanks to you, we passed the first crisis. The first crisis? Diallo asked. They'll keep watching. Duke Allure is waiting for me to remove this lily, I said, pointing to his chest. At least until the real pharaoh appears, I'll be under surveillance. Yes, you're right, Diallo replied, serious now. I patted his shoulder. Don't worry. We'll keep up appearances until then. Then I remembered something. Oh, one more thing. What is it? Who else in Argenta knows our secret? Besides Viel? I asked Diallo who else in Argenta knew about our contract marriage. Knowing that would help me act more carefully. Diallo looked surprised at the mention of Viel's name. I guess he hadn't realized I knew about her. I'm not so clueless I wouldn't notice, I said, crossing my arms. If your partner were that stupid, wouldn't it be hard for you too? He smiled, defeated. Yes, Viel knows. I didn't mention that I also knew she was a cleaner, it'd be too suspicious. Instead, I leaned in and whispered. Who else can I trust in Argenta? That way I'll know who to be careful around. He touched his chin thoughtfully. If that's your concern, you can rest easy, Crua. Rest easy? Why? At least on this floor, there's no need to worry. I blinked. The fourth floor? Everyone who goes up and down this floor can be trusted, he added casually. The maids too? There were only a few rooms here, but still, maids and escort knights came through. Diallo nodded with a smile. Yes. Oh, this sweet, naive man. I rubbed my forehead. You really don't have to worry. Just then, flames rose from his fingertips. If someone with this ability is allowed here, they're true Argenta, he said, his blue eyes shining. I hesitated. Could he really believe people never betrayed? Well, how should I explain? He turned off the light and laughed softly. You don't have to worry about betrayal from those on this floor. He patted my shoulder. True Argenta no betrayal is foolish. I looked at the ceiling, then back at him. Diallo, everyone knows betrayal is foolish. But people still do it, because they think they'll succeed. Even so, he wasn't shaken. He only smiled gently. I understand why you're worried, Crua. But once you get to know Argenta, you'll feel better. He hugged my arm, then pulled me closer. His lips brushed my neck, light but surprising. Practicing like this is okay, right? He asked. Of course. Trying to hide my red face, I looked away. Whoosh. The lights faded, powered by Argenta's magic. Sleep well, he whispered, laying me gently onto the bed. Darkness surrounded us. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about my future. If the real pharaoh returned and Argenta attacked Allure, I'd be seen as a traitor. Though I'd give up my Argenta title and leave, my ties to them would remain, just as promised to Diallo. Still. You want me to do this? Yes, the head requested it. Dial handed me a contract with a grin, the reason behind my morning anxiety. Dial didn't explain the contract, just handed it to me. It bore Diallo Argenta's name. This? If it involved the head, it had to be serious. But why show it to someone about to leave? It's for those leaving Argenta today, a magic contract to prevent leaking secrets, Dial said. I see. Did other families use this too? I'd never heard of it. The signer is waiting. You just need to go in. Okay, I said, and Diel smiled. Shall we meet them now? No reason to delay, better to get it over with. As I walked, reading the contract, I suddenly stopped. Madam? Diel asked, turning back. Wait, I said, eyes fixed on the text. Myrda, upon disclosing Argenta's secrets, will suffer unbearable thirst. If ignored, the head's fire will burn him and everything nearby. I muttered, the fire of the head. It was clearly a magic contract, and Diello hadn't signed it yet. Only my signature was needed. Is this kind of contract common? I asked. Not really, Diel replied. But no one dares break it. I sighed. It was hard to picture Diello burning. I followed Diel into the room, where a man with short brown hair greeted me briefly, Myrda, the one to sign the contract. You know how to do it, right? Diel said, handing him the paper and placing a quill in front of him, no ink. Then, clink, a dagger was set beside it. Myrda calmly pricked his finger, letting the blood fill the quill. If you break the oath, you'll return here, Diel warned, holding a human-shaped paper doll. Whoosh. It burst into flames, writhing before turning to ash. The others on the tray caught fire too. Myrda, remember the oath. I understand, he said, signing the contract with a pale face. Thank you. It was an honor to meet you, madam. Myrda gave me a deep bow before leaving. Despite departing from Argenta, he didn't look relieved. But why are you leaving? I asked. My wife's parents are ill. We want to be with them, he replied. I understood, it would have been hard to move them to Argenta. See you, Diel, I said. And I hope to hear good news, Myrda. Thank you, he said with a tired smile, then left. I picked up the contract. It felt like I'd stepped into Argenta's private affairs. Myrda was His Excellency's attendant, Diel said on the way back. Oh, no wonder the contract felt harsh, Diello must have cared for him. Knock, knock. We brought the contract, Diel said. Oh, come in, Diello replied casually, then flinched when he saw me. Krua? I saw a hint of surprise in his slightly bewildered expression. I brought the magic contract. Was this why he had been so confident the night before? Now, I know no one could easily betray Argenta. Diello, who had been lost in thought, glanced up at me with a faint smile. Oh, you received it early. Thank you, Krua. After carefully examining the contents of the contract, he took a dagger from his desk drawer. Ah. I was the only one who gasped in surprise. Though Diello did wince as the knife cut into his finger, he did not cry out. Tap. Pressing his blood-stained finger onto the contract, he used his handkerchief to wipe away the excess blood. The pure white handkerchief was now stained with red blood. As Diello looked down at the contract, he seemed to be slightly frozen. He would have felt uncomfortable reading it after all. His gaze remained fixed on the part of the contract that read, "The head will personally burn them." I heard that person was your attendant. Yes. Diello replied with a slightly subdued voice as he looked up at me with a somewhat pitiful smile. It's a shame. His gaze shifted towards the window. The contract, which was soaked in the blood of both parties, was now being engulfed in a blue flame and slowly disappearing. I felt instinctively that the blue flame was the sign that the contract had been bound. By now, he must have gotten on the carriage. Leaving immediately after sealing the contract was the rule. He stood at the window, his lips tightly sealed, unable to take his eyes off the view outside. In the end, I tapped him on the shoulder. To be honest, I was worried about betrayers yesterday. But now, I understand why there wouldn't be any betrayers. I spoke, giving him a big smile. Diello looked back up at me and gave me a faint smile, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yes, you're right. He replied, holding my hand that was on his shoulder and gently squeezing it. When Diello kissed the back of my hand, I could feel the warmth of his breath. Thank you for comforting me, Krua. After that, he whispered in my ear. See you tonight. Hearing those words made me feel like we were newlyweds. Glancing at his desk, which was piled high with papers, I realized that we really did need to see each other tonight. I grabbed him on the shoulder and left the room. As the door shut, Diello opened his eyes, now cold. His gaze fell on the spot where the contract had been. Knock, knock. Rick entered quietly, already aware of his task. Should I pursue them? Diello nodded. Follow the one coerced by Cardiel, Myrda. Watch him. Report if he contacts Cardiel. A small flame flared on Diello's fingertip before vanishing. Yes, understood, Rick replied and disappeared. Diello didn't react. Myrda was now under Argenta's watch, more closely than ever. Competence to succeed. He recalled Krua's words, betrayal requires conviction. A quiet laugh escaped him. Yes, Krua. The clever only betray when they're sure they'll win. Thud. He approached the window, watching the departing carriage. A whisper followed. As if I'd let that happen. The current Allure generation struggled to control their powers, volatile, like a storm ready to break. The Pharaoh, meant to stabilize them, was a fake, likely a puppet of the Allure. The plan was flawed, and with a real Pharaoh's appearance uncertain, defectors were bound to surface. Argenta didn't tolerate betrayal. It was time for a purge. Suddenly, an urgent knock, An attendant entered and knelt. Concerning movements in the fourth zone of the Endless Sea. The fourth zone? Diello's eyes widened. Field Commander Redias requests departure. Diello froze. Redias, the man who helped raise him, never acted without reason. Grave danger was certain. Diello seized his coat and moved. That afternoon, Diello suddenly left the mansion without a word. He left without saying anything? I asked, puzzled. Yes. There's a problem in the fourth zone, Diello replied curtly. The Endless Sea? I glanced out the window toward the distant waters, recalling the previous large-scale attack. Though Diello seemed gentle, he was powerful, he wouldn't fall easily to monsters. I hope he returned safely, I murmured, accepting the documents Viel handed over. The folder read simply, Shadows. Flipping through the pages, I read about an old Argenta tradition. Shadows were granted to families of those who served the house. Allure didn't have anything like this, I noted, stopping at one page that caught my attention. The names were listed below. Roa. I murmured the name, recognizing it instantly. Roa, once branded a criminal, had ultimately died protecting the Endless Sea. His grave was said to lie near the shore, a symbol of his sacrifice. In recognition, his family had been granted support through the shadows. His Excellency acknowledged Roa's efforts to the very end, Viel said, likely noticing my surprise. I gave a faint, wry smile. I thought so. Viel didn't respond immediately. When I turned to look at her, I caught a flicker of emotion in her eyes before she finally spoke. Families supported by the shadows live in comfort. They don't have to worry about their livelihood, unlike the rest of the people in the territory. Many within Argenta are content with that privilege. Argenta, but not the rest of the territory? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Her words implied a clear divide. Only those tied to the Argenta Duchy benefited from this support. Those outside it, ordinary people living within the territory, seemed excluded. Even so, Argenta's duchy ranked highest among others. Many saw it as a place of opportunity and stability. Early education to join Argenta was common, and people actively pursued paths to become part of it. I glanced down at the document again and asked, so, what does it take to become part of Argenta? In response, Viel conjured a flame at her fingertip, the same power Argenta wielded. It's this ability. Those in Allure or Cardiel also inherit their family's powers, right? She asked. I nodded. Yes, but in Allure, only a few can control water. And Duke Allure wouldn't share his power easily. I skimmed the papers. Even those without powers can work in the estate, but there's no mention of shadows or contracts. This seems unique to Argenta. Viel smiled. There are always differences between families. She pointed to a document detailing Argenta's welfare system. Families who joined Argenta received generous support, freedom of residence, exclusive housing, and a monthly payment equal to a year's commoner income. Impressive, I murmured. No wonder Argenta inspired such loyalty. Suddenly. Knock. What's the matter? I asked, raising my voice slightly. The door opened, and a knight stepped in, his appearance disheveled. Dirt clung to his hair and clothes, suggesting he had come straight from the field. Excuse me, madam, he said breathlessly. The fourth zone is requesting additional reinforcements. What? I blinked in surprise. But isn't Diello already there? Diello was the strongest in Argenta, why would they need more help? He gave the order himself, the knight replied. Viel looked stunned, but my reaction was different. This meant the situation had worsened far more quickly than expected. Redias Argenta, the one Diello saw as a father, was likely facing his end. His death would deeply wound Diello, both emotionally and strategically. As a key pillar in Argenta's strength, Redias's loss would shake the duchy's foundation. I turned my gaze back to the knight, more serious now. How many troops does he need? They're requesting forces capable of securing the zone swiftly. The battle is dragging on longer than planned, he answered. Viel seemed to calm down, assuming the situation wasn't as urgent as it first appeared. But I knew the truth. Redias Argenta wouldn't fall due to lack of reinforcements, he would die resisting the Tidebreaker, a sea monster capable of using water magic. Even with Diello present, no one could have expected a creature like that. It was unheard of in Argenta's history. I couldn't let that tragedy come to pass. Though this marriage was built on a contract, I wasn't detached enough to watch someone so important die. Redias wasn't just Diello's father figure, his power and presence were crucial to Argenta's strength, and that strength was tied to my own future. Thud. I stood up, my mind made up. I'll send reinforcements immediately. Normally, Viel or the knights would manage such decisions, but they didn't know what was coming, and I couldn't tell them. Claiming I'd read it in a book or had a dream would only raise suspicion. It's best if the knights determine the number of troops, I said calmly, then added with purpose, but I'll be going as well. Please assign a group to escort me. What? Viel looked up, clearly startled. I can control water, I replied, lifting my hand. Whoosh. Tea and water from a nearby vase rippled toward me, responding to my command. Both Viel and the knight stared, stunned. If reinforcements are needed even with Diello present, then my abilities might tip the balance. Not just for Diello, I was certain my power could save lives. And this time I wouldn't let fate run its course. I hate the sea, Diello muttered, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon. Long ago, the sea had changed, monsters began to emerge from its depths, attacking the land without mercy. In response, the Argenta mansion was built facing the coast, a symbol of resistance bathed in sunlight. But to Diello, that shimmering expanse was no paradise, it was the gateway to hell. From a young age, he had seen the ocean take and take. Friends, family, soldiers, all devoured by its waves. The sea, to him, was a graveyard. There are many who wish for your downfall, my lord. Become stronger, his mentor, Redias Argenta, had once said. And if strength fails you, then at least learn to endure sacrifice. Don't look at individuals, look at Argenta as a whole. To survive, you must become numb. Those words had kept Diello standing through the worst storms. And today, with Redias now commanding on the battlefield, those words rang louder than ever. Craw. When Diello reached the fourth zone, the coastline was already teeming with monsters. Without pause, he drew his sword. Whoosh. Flames erupted from the blade, consuming the beasts. Though immune to normal fire, the sea monsters burned instantly under the Argenta head's power. Kiek. Steam hissed as seawater boiled off their bodies. The head has arrived. Wah. The knight's morale surged, but Diello knew the tide hadn't turned yet. If this continues, we'll lose too many, he muttered. A few hours earlier, a massive wave had struck, carrying a monster that controlled the sea itself. Diello tried to counter it, but the waves kept crashing, relentless. They say even fire-wielding monsters are appearing in Cardiel's desert. Diello narrowed his eyes. This was no battle, it was a natural disaster. We requested reinforcements, but nothing significant will change, he said, quickly assessing the situation. Redias, the field commander, bowed. I apologize, my lord. Please stay safe. He had called Diello to reduce casualties, but the battlefield had become overrun by mutant sea monsters. Fire, Argenta's strength, was useless against the relentless waves. If Diello had inherited his full power through his pharaoh, things might have been different. With a complete bond, both he and his knights could have wielded overwhelming force. But without it, they could only hold the line, and even that felt miraculous. To stop them, sacrifice is necessary. Roa from the third zone had said the same before giving his life. Now, Redias was ready to do the same. Diello knew he couldn't reach the monsters deep in the sea, not without his full power. But someone with Argenta blood might. And Redias had made his choice. Recently, they said monsters capable of using fire have appeared even in the desert guarded by Cardiel. Diello narrowed his eyes. Cardiel was a noble family known for controlling the wind, and their ability was said to fan the flames of the enemy. Nevertheless, Cardiel's head had already found his pharaoh and was considered the strongest head in history. It was said that there were no issues when the head personally intervened, the situation was brought under control without any problems. But here, his real pharaoh had yet to appear. Unlike Roa, Redias had carried out his duties flawlessly as field commander. Yet now, to protect Argenta from overwhelming loss, he stood ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. Though he was Diello's mentor, and the last of his family, this was something even a head had to approve. My lord, I seek permission, Redias said quietly, bowing his head. He knew, as all Argenta did, that survival often came through sacrifice. Roa had done it. Now it was his turn. Tenacious Argenta, Diello murmured, bitterly. This was their way, honorable, but cruel. He bit his lip, on the verge of giving the order. Thud. Thud. A sudden sound cut through the storm, the rumble of galloping hooves. Diello turned. His eyes widened. That is. Redias paused, his resolve faltering. A cavalry unit approached, larger than expected. But it wasn't just the numbers that stunned them. At the head rode a woman with rain-soaked violet hair and glowing red eyes. Krua Alor? From her hand flowed a shimmering blue aura, the unmistakable power of Alor, the water-wielding family. Splash. Where there was water, Alor held the advantage, and Krua proved it. The crashing waves halted against an invisible barrier. I'll stop the water, she shouted, raising her hand. The raging sea calmed to ripples. Diello exhaled softly. Of course, Krua was an Alor. She could command water effortlessly. Near the sea, she was unmatched. She didn't have to be here. Yet, despite her family ties, she'd stepped into Argenta's battlefield, willingly. Crash. Water shimmered around her as it responded to her power. The violent sea stilled, and the tide of battle shifted. Diello. He knew it was time to move, to strike down the monsters, but he couldn't look away. For Argenta, the sea had always meant death. But now. For the first time, the sea sparkled, not with blood, but with life. And at its center stood Krua, radiant. Before heading to the battlefield, I practiced my water-controlling ability, it felt more natural each time, like breathing. The original Krua struggled even with tea, but ever since I possessed this body, that had changed. Splash. I shaped water into blades, marveling at the control I had gained. The captain of the knights approached. Preparations are complete. Waiting for your order. With Diello away, I held command. These elite knights from the 4th floor, loyal, trusted, and aware I was a fake pharaoh, awaited my lead. Their silence was reassuring, no spies seemed to lurk among them. The lower floor servants had once treated me coldly, but the moment they heard I'd be on the battlefield, everything shifted. Even they began showing respect. I faced the formation of knights. Time to lead. All troops, advance to the 4th zone. Raising a sword I didn't need but wielded for effect, I charged ahead on horseback. Cheers erupted behind me. Originally, only a small force was meant to go. But now, because I joined, they followed in full. In another family, a lady's presence might be feared. In Argenta, it rallied them. As the sea stretched out before us, a familiar thrill ran through me, the blood of Allure stirring at the scent of salt and the presence of water. This was where Allure was strongest. Where I was strongest. In the distance, a towering wave loomed, surging toward Argenta like a living beast. And amid the rising tension, I caught sight of Diello. His eyes, as blue as the ocean itself, widened in surprise at my sudden appearance. Splash. Blue energy, called forth by the water and Allure blood, pulsed through my hands. Strange, fish-like monsters charged toward me, but instead of fear, I felt an overwhelming calm. Confidence. With a determined sweep of my arm, the water obeyed, rising and reshaping into a massive spear. As the monsters lunged toward me, instinct took over. Blades of water erupted from the ground, slicing through their bodies with a violent splash. Craw. The monsters' cries echoed across the coastline. Gasps followed from the people of Argenta. Water? That ability. Is she really not the head? How powerful must the Duke of Allure be? In a land ruled by fire, my water stood out. The beach quickly descended into chaos as I summoned another surge. A massive wave flooded the shore, hiding the monsters, but I could feel them. Whether it was from the original story or their watery aura, I knew where they were. Crash. Clenching my fist, I scattered the wave, revealing a monster holding a crude staff, swaying on its legs. I conjured a massive spear of water. It shot forward. Thunk. But it failed to pierce. It resisted. Was it because it, too, could control water? Just then. Krua. Diello's low voice came from beside me. I turned. Whoosh. A brilliant fire ignited in the air and formed a spear in his hand, burning without harming him. Without hesitation, he threw it. Swish, crash. The spear hit dead on. Water evaporated instantly, the monster swallowed by steam. The sea monster is dead. Clean up the battlefield. Cheers erupted. I stood frozen, wide-eyed. Diello had just wiped out a water-drenched monster in its element, with fire. I knew he was strong, but not like this. Pounding, not in fear, but in awe. Seizing the moment, Redias led the charge, and I locked eyes with Diello amidst the chaos. How? He asked, surprised by my presence. His message had only asked for support, not help in battle. I smiled. I was worried. I can't let my partner get hurt. Besides, we're by the sea, I thought I could help. And truthfully, I wasn't sure he'd fight properly with that gentle nature of his. Thank you, Krua, he said with his usual soft smile, but something felt different. The calm man I knew had hurled a fiery spear without hesitation, striking the enemy with deadly precision. His eyes, pale blue like the sea, now held a sharpness I hadn't seen before. I'm glad I could help, I replied, wondering, was this truly the same Diello Argenta I thought I knew? The battlefield was quickly cleared, with minimal damage thanks to Redias and Krua. I thought the Allure had weak water powers. She's the madam now. Watch it. The knights were stunned by her strength. Diello, holding the unconscious Krua, caught her sea-like scent, strangely comforting to him. Rick. Yes. Keep her powers secret. Deal with any spies. Understood. Rick nodded lightly. As the head intelligence of Argenta and the executor, he would faithfully carry out Diello's orders. Krua Allure. No, Krua. Having completed his instructions, Diello muttered her name. According to the battlefield doctors, she was more likely to be in deep sleep than simply being exhausted. Even when her name was called, she didn't respond. It meant that she was deeply unconscious. Diello. In the midst of the blurry sea that had always appeared hazy in his eyes, a figure stood out. It was Krua, shouting with such intensity. Her sparkling purple hair, wet with water, and her crimson eyes filled with unwavering confidence, they were more radiant than anything else. She was mesmerizing, shining brightly even in the middle of the sea of death. She was so fascinating, so dazzling, that he couldn't tear his gaze away from her. Ah. I blinked, memories returning, Diallo helping me onto the horse, his gentle words, "You can rest now." Then, darkness. Waking up, my body felt heavy and dry, a clear side effect of using my powers. A maid entered, eyes widening in surprise. "You've woken up." "No need for a doctor," I said weakly. "What about Redias?" "He's already returned to the 4th zone." "I was out that long?" "A day and a half." "Thanks to you, the damage was minimal." Relief washed over me. At least they were safe. "And Diallo?" "He visits often to check on you." I smiled faintly. Even if it was a contract, he still cared. "Tell him I'm fine." "Yes, madam. But I must call the doctor, by the head's orders." "All right." As she bowed and turned to leave, she murmured, "For the sake of Argenta." "For the sake of Argenta?" I echoed softly. "Madam, Dr. Nias is here." "Let him in." He examined me carefully, then left. Moments later, Argenta's knights and maids entered, faces serious, voices respectful. For the sake of Argenta. A strange shift. These were the same people who once ignored me. Why now? Viel stepped in as they left, carrying a tray. "The moment you stepped onto the battlefield, everything changed," she said. "Even born Argenta hesitate. But you didn't. That was your first battlefield." "First battlefield?" I repeated. She nodded. "It's a trial. Those who wish to become Argenta must face battle without weapons. If they survive, they're accepted. If they die, their power returns to the head." So that was it. A silent, brutal tradition. Not just power, but the will to sacrifice. That's what forged their unity. As I sipped the soup she brought, I finally understood why the others looked at me differently. "It feels strange," I murmured. "I don't know when I'll leave." Then, after a pause, I looked at Viel. "Can you bring me a map of the continent?" Viel didn't ask why. She simply bowed, quiet, respectful, and unreadable. As I studied the map Viel brought, I began planning. Redias had been in danger, there wasn't much time before the real pharaoh appeared. I needed to prepare, just as I'd vowed. "The Daisy Forest," I murmured. A vast forest in the center of the continent, with a daisy river flowing through it. Few entered now, but soon it would become a key waterway. I'd long planned to buy land there. Real estate was the future, but I needed funds. I recalled the absurd clause in the marriage contract from the Allure family. That money was supposed to be mine. Retrieving it wouldn't be too difficult. As I considered this. Krua. Thud. The door burst open, and Diallo entered, breathless. "I was worried," he said. "The coast was chaotic." "So you're saying you're sorry you weren't here when I woke up?" He nodded, lips twitching. "I'm sorry. And thank you." I laughed. "It's fine. You've been busy." Despite the chaos, he had found time to check on me. "Still, are you okay?" He asked, concern in his eyes. "I just overused my powers," I said with a shrug. "My body wasn't used to it." He smiled weakly. "You really did. If I hadn't, Argenta would have suffered more damage," I said. "Its future was tied to mine now." Diallo sighed. "Thanks to you, many were saved. Still, next time, I should stop you." Then, smiling awkwardly, he added, "But your power in the sea was too incredible. I'm not sure I can protect you if it happens again." He cleared his throat. "So, what do you want to do, Krua?" I met his gaze. "I'll keep helping, until we drive out Allure, we're in this together." An unwelcome letter arrived, none other than from Duke Allure, the future source of my financial backing, or rather, a reminder of his demand to meet his daughter once a month. I looked away from his sparkling eyes as he glanced down at the map. "Daisy Forest?" he asked. "You're interested in that area?" "Yes. If I ever leave Argenta, I want to live there." He fell silent. "Diallo?" His eyes lingered on the map, voice low. "If you leave Argenta." The weight in his words caught me off guard. The Daisy Forest, with its large river, was ideal for someone with Allure blood. Monsters and wild beasts weren't a concern if one could manipulate water. Diallo squinted, recalling Krua's ability. He hadn't expected her to use it for Argenta. He didn't trust easily, unlike his innocent wife. Still, did she really need to leave? Even now, he could hear the echo of waves and see her standing on the coast, saving lives, defending Argenta. Her power made her unforgettable. And yesterday? "Someday, when I leave Argenta," she'd said. Wise, yet strangely naive. Why did she know some things and not others? I'll come back without any problems. Krua whispered to Diello as she boarded the carriage. I'm good at acting, so don't worry. Confidently stating her words, Krua left Argenta on the carriage to visit Duke Allure, as per the conditions of their unjust contractual marriage. It was undoubtedly an occasion to see how far Duke Allure's plan had progressed. Nay. Until the sound of the horses pulling the carriage faded into the distance, Diello stood in the spot where he had seen her off. As this is a reunion with my beloved daughter, would you mind giving us a moment? I'm aware of that. The more the head opened up to his pharaoh and gave away his innocence, the mark that suppresses his abilities gradually disappeared. That's why it might take some time. Those were Duke Allure's first words as I entered his study. His gaze flicked to the Argenta people behind me. Surely you don't think I'd harm my own daughter? At his remark, Viel and the others hesitated, until I gave them a reassuring look. Only then did they step back. Thud. The door shut, and his smile vanished. Now, I saw only a man who viewed me as a tool. He spoke coldly. I heard you've been busy. I let out a hollow laugh and replied in character, as Duke Allure loyal pawn. I've managed to keep sharing a room with Diello. But he's just two. I paused, putting on a troubled look. Naively idealistic. What? Lies always worked best when blended with truth. And Diello, in many ways, was genuinely pure. Anyone who frequents the fourth floor can be trusted, he once told me. I sighed. He's slow to open up, likely because of my background. You haven't been trying hard enough. His sharp gaze pinned me in place. I have, I murmured. But you know it's not just about seduction. The pharaoh bond doesn't work that way. I'm aware. He knew, the more Diello opened up and let go of his innocence, the weaker the seal on his power became. That's why, it might take some time. Duke Allure narrowed his eyes. Above all, don't get caught. Remember that, Krua Allure. He lifted my chin with cold fingers. Useless tools are discarded. And even useful ones, eventually. I nodded. This was the reality between us. In the original story, Duke Allure had never once acknowledged Krua, his illegitimate daughter. I'll keep that in mind. Feigning submission, I spoke carefully. But, my lord, I have a request. His eyes narrowed, more suspicion than interest. What is it? I'd like a portion of the Duchess's dignity fund redirected to me. Even just 1/10. His face twisted in disbelief. He clearly valued money more than family. I needed to win Diello's heart, I added. Clothes, grooming, appearance matters. To him, affection was transactional. So I used that logic. His brows twitched, but he nodded. I suppose so. I'll redirect a portion to you. However. Duke Allure blinked coldly. Show better results next month. Understand? I understand. Perfect. The Duchess's dignity fund was large, enough to buy idle lands in the central continent. Very well. He waved his hand, signaling me to leave. I stood, but then he spoke again. Turn around. Pardon? Diello Argenta's name. Thump. Thump. Servants in black emerged at the knock, seizing my arms. In the Duke's hand gleamed a dagger. It needs to be engraved again. I could barely breathe, pain sharp, suffocating. Though it ended quickly, the burn of the red letters Diello Argenta, freshly carved into my back, pulsed with every movement. The ointment dulled only the surface, the deeper wound throbbed relentlessly. Once inside the Argenta carriage, Viel, who always maintained a calm indifference, looked genuinely alarmed. May I examine it? Go ahead. She unfastened a few buttons of my dress, revealing the wound. Her breath caught. Did you come like this last time? Yes. Back then, it wasn't me, but Krua Allure from the original timeline. Still, I stayed silent. You knew it was false. I met her gaze. She must have noticed during my first bath here. I remember the faint glow of her healing salve reacting to the false engraving, proof she knew. After quietly rebut-toning my dress, Viel bowed her head. I'll be more careful to ensure your comfort. Her expression, unshaken even in chaos, didn't ease until we returned to the mansion. Diello Argenta disliked unpredictability, especially when it came late. Madam will be arriving soon. She's late. Unless the carriage broke down, something had happened. When Krua finally entered, his expression shifted. Her careful steps, the tension in her shoulders, he noticed it immediately. The wound was between her shoulder blades. His name had been re-engraved. You had my name engraved again, he whispered. How did you know? I just did. The faint scent of blood clung to her, unlike the battlefield, this one unsettled him. It should be properly treated. The surface is fine. But. So. His voice rose, unbidden. Anger flashed before he forced calm back into his tone. One more time. Let's treat it properly. Krua blinked, then nodded. All right. If you want it. Even now, she could smile. It both moved and infuriated him. She truly knew how to pierce the heart. Diello Argenta had never seen his name written so clearly, especially not on someone's body. Ah. Krua flinched, and Diello's hand froze mid-treatment. If it hurts too much, tell me. She laughed. Will that make it stop hurting? He exhaled softly. No. But I'll be quick. As she braced herself, his gaze fell on a deep bruise across her shoulder, evidence of violent restraint. His chest tightened. Krua glanced back, puzzled by his silence. Diello composed himself and gently blew over the wound after applying the ointment. All done. Thank you. She moved to button her clothes. Grab. He held her hand. No need. It'll just hurt more. His eyes met hers. Just take it off and sleep comfortably. It had been a long, exhausting day, and I thought I misheard him. Take off your top and sleep. But Diello repeated it gently, explaining, your skin's sensitive. The fabric will only make it worse. Plop. The outer garment slipped off, and the pain eased. But my face burned with embarrassment. I glanced at him. He didn't look away, only sat calmly, kindness in his blue eyes. You don't have to worry, he said, holding my hand. We promised to just hold hands and sleep. He kissed my hand softly. Warmth lingered, between us, and inside me. I lay down carefully, avoiding the blanket against my back. Diello smiled gently and handed me a soft pillow. If it hurts, let me know. The cold air brushed my exposed back, and I shivered instinctively. Diello reached out, then hesitated as our eyes met. And we both laughed quietly, without a word. Raising his hands in surrender, he whispered, excuse me, and gently pulled the blanket over me, careful not to touch my wounds. It's okay, he said, then lay beside me, keeping his distance. Sleep well, Krua. His eyes closed peacefully. The room dimmed as shadows gathered, his power at work. Just as full darkness settled, time seemed to still. I blinked, and saw his eyes open again. Then, softly, unexpectedly. It's embarrassing, Krua. What? Diello only grinned. If you keep looking at me like that. His face flushed, and he dropped a pillow between us. Plop. Now, all I saw was the white pillow. Was I staring too much? From beyond the pillow, his voice came softly. You don't have to be on guard. I laughed. I was just looking at your face. I took his hand resting on the pillow, warm and slightly trembling. I'm not on guard. Silence. Really? He asked. Yes, I replied instantly, and he chuckled. What's wrong? I started to ask, but the room went dark. No reply came. The warmth of his hand and the heavy darkness lulled me, and I soon drifted into deep sleep. The next day, Diello was still asleep when I woke up. Did you sleep well? I gently brushed my hand against his sleeping face. He had gone to bed late, and I'd been worried. Creak. The door opened a crack, and a maid peeked inside. I quickly raised a finger to my lips, signaling her to be quiet. Her eyes widened, and she silently backed away. I caught a glimpse of Viel beyond her. Was something going on? Right. Today was the scheduled day for the shadow distribution. Someone would need to give the final approval. I glanced at the clock. 11 o'clock. It made sense that the servants were growing anxious. Should I handle it? Final approval mostly meant overseeing the inspection of goods. It was a tedious job, yes, but manageable. If I took it over, Diello could rest a little longer. All right. I'll do it. As I lifted my arm to stretch, a sharp pain shot through it, and I quickly lowered it. Strange. Okay then. Let's go. I turned away from the bed. Behind the closed door, Diello would still be asleep. Sleep well. With yesterday's gratitude still warming my heart, I looked back once, then stepped forward to begin the day. Thud. The door clicked shut. Diello's eyes opened. Whoosh. He flung the pillow aside, gaze fixed on the spot where Krua had just been. Despite his exhaustion, he hadn't slept. The warmth beside him, her breath, her stillness, it had stirred something in him. A quiet heat that refused to let his thoughts rest. He looked at his hand. She's an allure. Could someone from that bloodline truly feel this warm? They had promised to only hold hands. Yet all night, he had gripped and released her hand, over and over. Trying to silence the tension that only grew louder in the silence. Today, Krua chose to work in the garden, enjoying the clear weather. Her documents were neatly arranged on a simple outdoor table, a peaceful scene. Diello, however, remained on the terrace, watching her from afar. Behind him, Rick stood waiting, clad in black. You sent Krua her dignity maintenance fee, right? Diello asked. Rick nodded. About a tenth of the full amount. Still a sizable sum, but Diello knew she wouldn't spend it on clothes or socializing. She had other plans. From where he stood, he could see her smiling. She glowed, like sunlight on water. Krua. He said her name softly, brows drawing together. The Allure successor was supposed to be her brother, Pentus. Strong, skilled with fire, yet Allure had still sent a fake pharaoh into Argenta. If Pentus was truly superior, why risk it? Unless Krua had been hiding her power. Even if I'm your accomplice, he murmured, recalling her words. A wry smile tugged at his lips. If you're hiding your strength, you should hide it from me, too. Especially in a land of fire trying to protect the sea. He turned to leave the terrace. Just then, another informant arrived and bowed. My lord, someone seeks a secret meeting with you. Diello frowned. A secret meeting? A bad feeling crept in.